Support for Current Conversations is provided by Outreach Video and Media Services, University of Oklahoma Outreach, and World Literature Today. Welcome to Current Conversations. I'm R.C. Davis Indiano. Today we're going to visit with a young advocate on the front lines of social change. We will speak with Romeo Jackson, an advocate for LGBTQ rights and social recognition. Romeo will also explain the perspective that many young people are taking on national politics. Join us for this fascinating conversation. Romeo Jackson, welcome to Current Conversations. It's really good to have you on the show.
Happy to be here.
We haven't had a lot of young people to sort of see what's going on in the culture, so especially value your presence here. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I think it's fair to say that you have spent your young life, if I could put it that way, already as a social educator, maybe an activist. Do you have a working definition of social justice that maybe you work out of for yourself, or even several definitions?
Yeah.
What do you think of when I say social justice?
Well, I didn't really think about the question until you asked, like, what does it really mean to do social justice work? And I was thinking it's probably broadly a set of movements, moments, ideas, ideologies to end oppression of all forms of life. And lives meaning not only human lives, but animals, the planet, right, the water, like all those types of things, right, that it is just a set of things around ending oppression.
You've really committed your life to that already, haven't you? I mean, that's what you do.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's because I've been doing this, right, this work, since I was about 19. And before that time, actually, I was pretty, not aware of most things. Being raised Black on the south side of Chicago, I obviously was aware of poverty and racism, but...
So you're in Utah now,
yeah,
but
I'm in
you grew
Utah
up in
now.
Chicago.
Yeah, the south side of Chicago, moved to a suburb for high school. But I didn't really know that was necessarily abnormal, right? Like, poverty was new. I always tell people, I didn't know that people paid cash for food for a long time. I had a link card. Everyone I knew had a link card. I was like, oh, it wasn't until I actually went to undergrad that I was like, oh, people who aren't poor. There are people,
link cards, is that like food stamps?
Yeah, like food stamps.
Okay.
Yeah, there's people who don't, who don't have to worry about their lights being cut off. I had just grew up with that was so normal. And so it was kind of that process of entering into higher education and really seeing power dynamics play out for the first time between races and genders that really, I feel got me started. I was like, oh, there's work to be done.
Maybe you're answering what I wanted to ask, but I'm still going to ask it. People that do the kind of work that you're doing, I think people underestimate it very often.
Yeah.
You really sort of, a lot of things you're not going to do in your life because you do this, because you really care about it.
Yeah.
Was there a single experience or a single person that modeled this kind of work from you, or was it just being in Chicago? What pointed you in this direction and made you think that you could have a good impact and advance the good of social justice?
Yeah. I haven't really thought about what I could be doing. I was a theater major for a while, and I did leave that knowing to do this, right? I was a stage manager, which is the most time-consuming job in the world, but I left that knowing that I couldn't do both, right? I wasn't getting any sleep. I was kind of crashing all the time. So there was that one choice. And I don't know if there was one person, but I grew up in a family and community that was committed to taking care of people and other people. And I always say, my grandmother taught me to do this kind of work long before anyone else. Just watching her exist in the world.
See, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
So it was a person.
Yeah, that existence was great. But I also think the work of Audre Lorde, I think intellectually and socially and politically, really is what I would say radicalized me, where there really was you can exist as a Black queer body in this world as a whole person and not have to choose, that your own personal experiences are super important to how you engage political work.
Was it a moment where you, maybe because of the influence of your grandmother and Audre Lorde or others, where you said, yeah, I'm not going to get a job. I'm going to do this work in whatever form it takes and whatever it costs. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I don't really think. Well, so I think when like my work being situated in higher education, like there was semi a model, right? Like we have models of like scholar activists, right? Like
Right.
Barbara Smith right. Like we have all these models of people who have kind of walked both. And I do know the moment I applied to grad school was the moment that I knew, like I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing. I was like, this is right. Like I am gonna get this master's degree. I'm gonna apply for the PhD program. I'm going to make my life out of kind of like this intellectual scholar activist model. And that continues to be scary in many ways. Like I think
It is scary.
It's an ongoing process of like
it's a huge commitment.
Making that choice. And like this is kind of what, and like knowing that I can always change trajectory. Like I'm a person who hyper plans. so I'm like, if I do it, I have to stick to it and kind of really seeing that my work can look different over my life.
Where do you think, okay, in anybody's job, even if it's a job that you're creating yourself, the kind of work that you do, there's a lot of busyness, just, getting there and going home and so on and so forth. Where would you say that social justice values comes into what you do now most directly? Where are you aware that you're really advancing that cause?
I think it's actually my work outside of higher education, the academy, with community organizers. So I think one thing that happens when we become intellectuals or like we decide to do grad school is that we go into the ivory tower and kind of forget, right? Like we forget folks on the ground. Right. I think who really risk so much more than I think I do doing the work that I do. And so what I try to do is I do a lot of trainings and workshops with community organizers. I try to show up in solidarity a lot because I get the luxury to read for a living, right? Like I get to read and think for like 20 hours, 40 hours a week. And like, that's great. But those folks don't have time to do that because most activists, as you probably know, are busy trying to survive plus doing this work. So this isn't the work they actually make a living off of. And I try to transmit knowledge as much as I can or like different ways of thinking.
What are you teaching? What are the courses you're teaching?
So it really depends. So I do a lot of my work centers around coalition building. Once I think it's done, we're going to get anywhere. But also, I think, how do we think about that while centering the most margins? So I just developed a workshop around how do we center trans women of color in our community organizing, right, in our practice, right? Like, how do we take the practices that we do currently, so we're not remaking things, and how do we add analysis, and how do we add ways of thinking that really puts folks at the center? And I do a lot of like power analysis work.
Is this under a sociology heading or?
I don't know if I have a heading.
Okay, I mean, aren't you in a department?
Oh, what department? Okay, yeah. I was like, I don't know if I have a heading. Well, that work is, so I teach in gender studies, but that types of training workshops are outside of that. The classes I teach in higher education are like intro to gender studies classes because that's what they give to grad students.
Why do you think people in the country right now are so sensitive about gender issues? I mean, I can't think of too many issues that people seem to respond more from the gut and often in a kind of a negative way. What's going on with that? Why?
Yeah, so I think it's a bunch of stuff. I think first and foremost on this land, right, it has to do with colonialism, right? Like if we think of pre-colonial era, what is now the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, right, that there was much less strict gender roles or that gender roles were more fluid, right? It wasn't as if like there was not gender roles, but the values that we assigned to them were dramatically different. So I think that's one, right? I think the importing of Christianity, right, was fundamental to colonialism, and then reinforcing binary gender systems, right? That like part of the justification for European settlers of colonizing the U.S. was like, oh, like these native people have like gender roles that we don't understand. Right. I think there's that, and I think now contemporarily, like we're still filling that, and then also that it is fundamentally questioning people's worldviews, right? That like something as simple as like there are more than two genders, that you can exist outside of two genders. I don't think it's always about the gender part. It's about your fundamentally question everything I've been taught to know my whole life. And that scares us. I mean, it still scares me. Like when I learn new things that fundamentally shake my worldview, it's still a scary process. Unlike most people, I don't go out and then campaign against people, like kill people, beat them, harass them. We turn to internal reflection to understand why we're disrupted. But I think those are some of the reasons why.
Let me push this just a little bit further. I mean, what you're saying is really helpful. You know, you could say that any person you meet challenges your assumptions of the world. You've never met that person before. They're unique. What is it about, what is gender touch in people, I wonder, when it's being defined as a spectrum of response rather than just a sort of binary oppositions. I wonder what it touches that throws people off so much. I don't, because I really don't understand that response.
Well, part of it is also tied to an ideology. So I do like that, right, that push around, like, we meet people all the time who may check our assumptions, challenge things that we think to know. But I feel that we've kind of built a society around it, right? Like, so like, and I think that's the piece that people also, that I think that elicits super hostile responses.
Things people just want to assume and they really don't want to talk about.
Yeah, or something that you're like, oh, like, I didn't know people wore contacts. Like, that, like, sure, that's challenging an assumption, but, like, I haven't tied my whole value to that. Yeah. We've tied our values to gender and race and sexuality and ability, right? Like, we have tied our worth, I think dominant people have tied worth to such those things that there's more at risk than, like, the contacts.
What I've heard from a lot of people who are socially active is that in the last 10 years, they feel like there's been some kind of shift, maybe in perception, maybe in reality. But I've heard a lot of people say that maybe roughly 10 years ago, they felt that more social change was really just like right on the horizon, about to happen. And they feel that in the last 10 years, things have become more difficult. It's like we weren't where we thought we were. Maybe we got pushed back.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that? Do you see things that way?
So I was 14 10 years ago. And if I remember correctly, like, this was when the election, like, Obama was like, we're in that period.
About 12 years ago.
Well, so, and I think the election of Barack Obama, I don't necessarily know why. I mean, I remember as a 14-year-old, like, kind of thinking, like, oh, great. Like, and for my great-grandmother, who was still alive at the time, the election of a Black president meant a lot, right? So my great-grandmother is from Mississippi. Like, her mother was an indentured servant, like, right? Like, slavery is in that close proximity to my existence. So for my great-grandmother, for my grandmother, for my father, like, those, like, the election of Barack Obama meant a lot. But I think that was a misnomer, right? That this idea that just because we've elected this Black body to the highest political office we have, that we were somehow in a progressive space. And I also think folks who are my age, like, we came into political awareness in the age of Obama, right? Now, so the Obama administration was not perfect, right? There was still imperialism, right? There was still there was lots of things that were wrong with the administration that we tend not to think about. But that for us, like, that's what we knew, right? Like, we only knew this this Black man being in political office who had, like, relatively progressive values compared to what we have heard about George Bush, right? Like, I heard a lot about George Bush, but, like, you're like, okay. So I think, like, part of what the election of Donald did, right, was like, oh, we are in a new national political moment that we haven't had to deal with before, right? Like, we, meaning I think folks my age or millennials, are just like, okay, like, this is a different ball game nationally. Like, we have someone who is spewing rhetoric that Barack Obama would have never uttered from his mouth probably. And so then how do we respond? Which I think also gets at a lot of our feelings of hopelessness, right? Like, I think historically, like, I was shocked the night of the election. I woke up the next morning like, well, duh, this is what happens, right? Like, white panic set in, like, there's always a backlash to what's perceived as racial progress. And so if we think of it historically, the election of Donald Trump is actually not that surprising in many ways. Like, yeah, like, there's always backlash. Like, we have Reconstruction and we have a wave, right, that led us into Jim Crow.
So is the sequence you're talking about, is it sort of roughly this, that world where people assume certain things about gender, certain things about power, that was the way the world was. Black president gets elected. For a lot of people, that challenges that world and basically sets off a period of kind of conservatism and reversion to as much as they can back to the world before Barack Obama?
Well, and I think national progressive leaders, I think community organizers are always kind of like disenchanted with national politics. But I think what happens, I interned in D.C. twice during Barack Obama's presidency. And what I noticed was a lot of, like, compromising and complacency. And then Donald Trump was elected, and we get this intense organizing. And I always wonder, what if we pushed this hard when we had a Democratic president?
Go back for just a second. So you were in D.C. during Barack Obama's presidency. There was a lot of complacency on the part of...
I think progressive nonprofits based in D.C. to want to, like, what in their eyes they saw as working with a sympathetic president.
Right. So they just kind of took it for granted. We got this.
Yeah, or that we didn't push or challenge as hard as we wanted to. I don't know if you remember, but during the last Pride celebration in the White House, Jenna Gutierrez interrupted the president, really to name the harsh conditions that trans women face in detention centers, right? Like that part of what had happened was Pride or LGBT organizations were now welcomed in the White House. And once you get a seat at the table, right, we tend to stop being as radical, as agitating, right? But really, and what we saw is that Genocide Gutierrez was booed. Right, that this trans undocumented woman who was really naming these harsh conditions was booed by people in the room partly because folks thought like, oh, Barack Obama has been so good to us. Well, he's been good to some of us, right? Like that's true. Like we've gotten stuff, but that like I think complacency, that okay with accepting anythingness.
That sense that we've got it, we can go to the next stage, people can make demands that they should make to go to the next stage of social justice. And not realizing what a lot of the working class, white working class, was thinking during this period.
Well, I think that, or I think what a lot of poor, queer, and trans people of color were experiencing and thinking, right? Because most of the progress we got from the Obama administration, did it really help poor and trans people of color, right? Or did it help the gay elite? Right, like, I mean, it helped me, but like, I'm in higher education, right? Like, I have all this mobility, like, you know? So there were parts of that I definitely benefited from, but to suggest that my cousins who are Black and poor and trans.
Well, see, I've heard this from Black friends who say, you don't know what it was like. A lot of white America doubled down. Basically, if you want to elect a Black president, then we're going to make you pay a little bit.
Oh, of course.
And they said it was a tough time for a lot of Black communities. Because of that doubling back. Are you disappointed where things are socially right now? Is this a period of a dark period of disappointment? How would you describe how you feel about this?
You know, I'm a pessimist. And so it's always a dark period for me. Well, and so I try, because I don't think this is a uniquely bad period, right? I think it's always been bad, and it always probably will be bad as long as our nation state is maintained. So I know that, I think, and I try to also hold, once like I was saying earlier, that a lot of us, this heightened rhetoric is intense and new. But what I will say is that Barack Obama deported millions of people from this country, right? Like, I mean, like, this system that Donald Trump has activated and raised in public profile and rhetoric was not built when he was elected. And so that's when I say it's always a dark period for me, is that we have always been deporting millions and millions of people from this country, right? Like trans women of color continued to be killed when Barack Obama was president. And so part of, I think, my frustration with our rhetoric around Donald Trump is that, oh, this is uniquely bad, or we have to, like, I don't think it's uniquely bad. Like, you know, the government has always suppressed Indigenous and Native people. Like, that's not new. And so,
good point.
And so how do we make sense of the heightened rhetoric, but also stay diligent, right? Remember, like, that we stay focused, that, like, these systems and structures are much deeper than Donald Trump. Like, I mean, we can impeach the man, but, like, then we get Mike Pence, and then we get Paul Ryan, and you're like...
Where are we?
Yeah, you're like, okay, like, then where are we, right? You're like... I don't know. So that's why I say, like, I don't feel a pretend sense of dread. But I will say the day after the election, it was hard for me to go outside.
Yeah. You know, I'm really interested in what you said about maybe we overplayed the implications of Barack Obama's presidency.
Oh, yeah.
When so many things really went on as usual, and overplaying that, and then Donald Trump is so out front with his racism and just a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It seems like a terrible contrast, but you're saying maybe it wasn't that much of a contrast. He's maybe more out with what he believes, but with Barack Obama, there was hypocrisy, just kind of hidden oppression.
Well, so the seat of the president, and this is the problem when you get to, like, identity politics and representation. Like, I don't want more Black people in a racist government just to enact racist policies, right? Like, that doesn't work.
Clarence Thomas.
Yeah, great, right? The perfect example. And so the problem is that the seat of the presidency will always be a seat that reinforces white supremacy, imperialism, colonialism, sexism, ism, right? Like current U.S. imperialist projects, right? Like that seat will always have to perform that regardless of the body who sits there.
Yeah.
And so I think, and I think so partly what Barack Obama did was we forgot that, right? Or that we didn't forget that, like, it allowed us to, like, invoke that identity politics.
He's very smart.
He's very smart.
Charming,
he's an intellect. I mean,
sophisticated.
I mean, like, Michelle Obama's great. I mean, like, Sasha and Malia are, like, awesome. Bo's super cute, right? Like, you know, and I think that that's important, but I think it's also important on, like, this kind of, like, symbolic level. Like, I was talking to my grandmother a little bit about Barack Obama, Because I was like, Grandma, I don't really get it. Like I don't get why you refuse to kind of critique Barack Obama, or why you refuse to see some of the anti-Black policies that are still like being enacted on our right. But that for my grandmother, I just think it meant something so dramatically different. Like she never thought she will. I mean, she lived in like the Jim Crow South. Like she just never thought that it would even be possible for a Black body to get to that spot. And so like we have this really intense generational disconnect where I'm just like I get the historical significance and I get that's important, but like still the president.
See, I kind of wonder if you both weren't right. Because on the one hand, for Barack Obama to be elected, it had to say something. But I'm really taken with your point that if you look at the real cultural politic and say, well, what really changed for certain communities that are marginalized, gender communities and people of color, you're saying maybe not that much changed.
Well,
How could it?
And I just don't know what it says about even people being less racist or less anything else, right? So part of, like, Barack Obama is an Ivy League educated lawyer who performs business standard English and respectability and is charismatic, right? So does it actually say much that, like, he actually got to the presidency if, like, all these other strict norms had to be reinforced around gender and race, right? Like, so it means even my own existence in higher education, like, part of why I'm here is that I perform the way dominant culture wants me to, right? Like, I'm articulate, right? Like, I write the way they wanted me to write to get into school, right? I got the grades that were required. I tested correctly, right? I continue to perform with the ways that are expected. And so is it really that transformational, radical, or progressive that I'm in higher education?
No, I hear you. I can imagine you arguing, and I would feel the persuasiveness of it, that we, in some ways, might be better off with Donald Trump because he is what he appears to be, whereas Barack Obama looked a whole lot better, but you're saying fundamentally the underlying conditions were exactly the same.
Well, and I think, like, the increased rhetoric may, I think, have emboldened some people, right, to maybe act more violently than they were before. But I also think, like, this is a misnomer to say because we have more videos of certain things that they're new or increasing. Like, I tell people all the time, like, we see more Black bodies being killed by cops, but Black people have always been killed by the police. Like, that isn't new. I wouldn't even say it's on the rise. I would say we're just seeing more of it, right? It's always been there.
Well, and there's an awful lot of support for what you're saying. The research is being done in certain parts of the country, how the police have acted over the last 10 and 20 years, and Black people have been saying for a long time. The research is coming out now saying, they pretty much... It's what they said, just nobody believed it. So if I say, well, there doesn't seem to be much of a national conversation about race, when obviously there needs to be, I'm sort of gathering that you would say, of course not, because nothing's changed.
Well, I think there's a national conversation on race. There's not a national conversation on racism or white supremacy, right? So, like, there is a national race conversation, right? Like, Donald Trump's rhetoric reinforces that all the time with this myth of building a wall and, like, Muslim ban, right? Like, so that's there. I think we're not talking, and we have never talked about race and racism and white supremacy on a national level. And that continues to be the problem. Because we talk about race all the time, like, kind of... We're like Muslim ban. Oh, like, the wall will stop immigration. Like, that doesn't make sense. But... And once again, even Barack Obama didn't do this, right? Like, that racism, that white supremacy, that anti-Blackness, that's never talked about on a national level.
Now, your friends who are roughly your age, would this be what you're explaining today, which I'm very persuaded by the way, sounds good. Is this a critique that you hear from a lot of your friends that you share with each other? Would you say this is a kind of a young person's critique right now?
Well, I have a very particular friend group. But, like, so yes, I think in our friend group, like what I'm articulating now, like, I mean, we talk about it, like, right, that's why, I mean, like, we talk about it all the time. I think about it all the time. But I do think that I think this type of acknowledgement of certain things also is hard to grapple with, particularly because I do have friends who are very actively involved in national politics, who are involved in electoral politics, who do voter rights organizing, and those are the type of things that I don't spend a lot of time thinking about. And I think that work is important. And so I don't know if, like, I hold like a similar belief to a lot of those folks. But
Let me interject.
Yes.
You know, the line on you and people your age very often is you're just not involved. You just don't want to know about politics. But you're showing a whole different side.
Yeah.
You're saying, oh, no, we're savvy. We're just not going to go with the sort of national PR about anything. We're going to look at the reality of how things are really playing on the ground for the communities, the trans, other communities, how they're really, really affected, not the way it's being described.
Well, or that like, is voting the only way to be involved in things? Like there's always, right? So there's like, we have constructed a reality where like only voting and electoral politics is the only way to be engaged.
Yeah.
Right, and that there's,
Yeah.
right, and like for some, like, you know, like, people forgot, but like I didn't vote in the last election because I was faced with Donald Trump, who's admittedly a terrible person. Hillary Clinton would have been better, right? Like this is the disconnect, I think, a lot when we don't think of embedded structures and system, is that is there a policy that Hillary Clinton would have passed that would have been better?
Like, would have really made any difference.
Would have made a significant shift in our culture. And so I didn't choose to put my energy towards voting, right? And so then the conversation becomes, Romeo, well, then you can't complain. I will. Right? Like,
well, you make me think that people shouldn't be assuming what young people are thinking.
Yeah.
They should hear.
Yeah.
Okay, not a lot of time left.
Oh, okay.
If you look maybe like 10 years down the road,
okay.
what's something that's going to happen, good or bad, in the area of the world that will affect race and race equity, that people can remember you said and decide you were right or not?
So my moment of optimism. I do think the increased rhetoric and the backlash created by Donald Trump, I hope will spark, I think, us to think really deeply about structures and systems, that think deeply about what it means when one of us to make it and what that might mean for the rest of us.
Like an awakening.
Yeah, and I really hope that we begin to interrogate our own anti-immigrant sentiment, right? Because I think one of the things that has happened post-election is that I'm talking a lot more about anti-immigrant sentiment in our country.
Good, we can look for that. So, thank you so much.
Thanks.
A pleasure talking to you. Thanks for being on the show. That's all we have time for today. Please find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much for being a part of today's show. Join us next time for more current conversations.